Coming up today, South Korea and the United States agree to look into ways of permanently deploying U.S. strategic weapons on the Korean peninsula to counter North Korean threats. President Park Geun-hye stresses the importance of law and order as South Korea marks Police Day. She also thanks officers for protecting the people from threats both domestic and overseas. Plus, Russia extends its ceasefire in Aleppo by an extra 24 hours. It says the pause in military action will give civilians time to get out of what remains of the city. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Friday, the 21st of October. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you ever so much for joining us today. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this afternoon, South Korea and the United States have agreed to look into additional ways to strengthen Washington's deterrence measures against North Korea's missile and nuclear threats. Deploying U.S. strategic military assets permanently on a rotation basis to the south is also up for discussion. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Kim Hyun-bin filed this report from Washington, D.C.
This year's security consultative meeting at the Pentagon focused on expanding the Allies' extended deterrence to counter North Korea's growing nuclear and missile threats. Sitting down with South Korea's Defense Minister Han Min-koo, U.S. Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter said the U.S. will use the full spectrum of its defense capabilities to defend South Korea. He added that Washington is changing the structure of its forces on the peninsula to meet that end.
We're adapting our force structure on the peninsula, most recently by agreeing as allies to deploy THAAD to defend against North Korean missile threats. And that's why we're ensuring we remain ready to, as we say, fight tonight. And we're working together to achieve a conditions-based transfer of wartime operational control.
Mr. Han said the upgraded U.S. commitment offered by Secretary Carter will ensure South Korea can defeat any attack, including a potential nuclear attack by North Korea.
We discussed numerous measures of extended deterrence to better counter Pyongyang's nuclear and WMD threats. We're going to double our citizens' trust in extended deterrence.
The two defense chiefs are considering the permanent deployment of U.S. strategic assets to the Korean peninsula on a rotational basis to strengthen extended deterrence against North Korea's threats. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News, Washington, D.C.
Now, as we just saw in Hyun-bin's report there, the two defense chiefs of South Korea and the United States said they will consider whether to deploy U.S. strategic assets on the Korean peninsula in a rotational basis. Our Connie Kim reports on which pieces of hardware could be on the list.
South Korea and the U.S. is reviewing the possibility of deploying U.S. strategic military assets to the Korean peninsula on a rotational basis as a deterrent against North Korea. South Korean military officials say the move would enable the allies to respond immediately to the North's provocations. The allies have a number of options to consider, but here are a few likely candidates. The F-22 is seen as the most likely asset to be permanently deployed here. The stealth fighter jet is capable of sneaking past North Korea's radar undetected and can target objects with a high-level precision. The North's Rodong-Sinmun newspaper was reported to have doctored a picture of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to disguise his whereabouts on the day the U.S. flew F-22s over South Korea after Pyongyang's long-range ballistic missile launch in February. B-52, B-1B, and B-2 bombers could also be deployed to the peninsula. A B-52 bomber can fly up to 16,000 kilometers and can carry bunker-buster bombs that can penetrate underground facilities. B-2 stealth fighter jets can also carry missiles and up to 16 nuclear bombs. Two B-1B Lancer strategic bombers flew over South Korea as a show of force in response to North Korea's fifth nuclear test last month. There is also speculation that nuclear-powered submarines could be deployed to South Korea. The North's successful firing of a missile from a submarine in August raised concern within the South that North Korea's submarines could launch preemptive strikes on the South. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, the White House has responded to North Korea's repeated missile provocations by saying they underscore the need for tougher UN Security Council sanctions on the regime. Deputy spokesperson Eric Schultz made the comments to reporters Thursday while on board Air Force One. He said the US condemns North Korea for blatantly violating UN resolutions that forbid the regime from using ballistic missile technology. He added that the North's defiant actions bolster the resolve of the international community to deal with Pyongyang. South Korea, the United States and Japan will hold high-level trilateral talks in Tokyo next week with a focus on North Korea's provocations, according to Seoul's foreign ministry on Friday. South Korea's number 2 diplomat Im Sung-nam and his US and Japanese counterparts Antony Blinken and Shinsuke Sugiyama are going to get together next Thursday to hold their 5th round of vice minister level talks following their previous round of talks in July in Hawaii. The three are expected to discuss how to increase trilateral pressure on North Korea following the regime's 2 nuclear tests and 24 ballistic missile tests this year alone. Bilateral talks between Seoul and Washington, as well as Seoul and Tokyo, are also being arranged. Marking South Korea's 71st Police Day, President Park Geun-hye has stressed that law and order are the basis for sustainable national innovation to overcome outstanding crises on the security and economic front, showing her appreciation for the policemen and women's sacrifices to protect the public. President Park noted how Korea is often ranked among the safest countries in the entire world. She said law and order are the foundation of a just and fair society, as the poor and weak are usually the first to suffer if order collapses. President Park also noted rising terror threats both from North Korea and elsewhere, and asked police to take a greater role in disaster management. Now, in domestic politics, it's the final day of the National Assembly's month-long audit. Last but not least, in the hot seat today are the Presidential Secretary's Office, National Security Council and Presidential Security Service. However, the overwhelming bulk of the morning session was taken up with one issue alone, namely the no-show by President Park's under-fire Senior Secretary for Civil Affairs, Woo Byung-woo. The opposition parties have been demanding he come to answer questions about corruption allegations. They've been pressing the steering committee chair to use his power to ensure Mr. Woo makes an appearance even later in the day, if need be. The president's aide has been mired in various allegations, including suspicious real estate deals regarding his wife's family and special favors given to his son regarding his military service. Korea's STX Offshore and Shipbuilding has filed for bankruptcy protection in the United States as the ailing shipyard looks to offload its business to a foreign buyer. According to the Wall Street Journal Thursday, the administrator managing STX Offshore's Korean bankruptcy case has placed the company into Chapter 15. Now, Chapter 15 is a section of the US Code that deals with international insolvency. If recognized by the judge, Korea's 4th largest shipbuilder will be entitled to receive the benefits of US bankruptcy law, including stopping lawsuits and preventing creditors from seizing assets. STX Offshore, with assets worth more than $2 billion, but liabilities of $5.5 billion as of last year, actually filed for receivership back in May. It has been hit hard by Chinese competitors amid slowing global downturn in the industry. Now, it's some big and exciting news for tech fans. Apple's iPhone 7 and iPhone 7 Plus hit shelves in Korea on this Friday. The models, which boast features such as wireless earphones and a much improved camera, are available at retailers nationwide, and the queues have already formed. The iPhone 7 series comes in 5 colors and carries a price tag of roughly $770 for an iPhone 7 and around $900 for an iPhone 7 Plus. Reflecting the popularity of the new models, pre-orders were more than double that of the iPhone 6 series. Apple is expected to see a significant boost in iPhone sales with the termination of Samsung's Galaxy Note 7. Now, Russia has called a ceasefire in Aleppo to allow civilians to evacuate the besieged city. The international community has welcomed the move, but still says it isn't nearly enough. Oh Young with the details.
Russian airstrikes on the Syrian city of Aleppo will remain on hold for an extra 24 hours until Friday evening local time. The ceasefire was ordered by Russian President Vladimir Putin to give civilians more time to leave rebel-held districts through 8 corridors. The move comes amid growing calls from the international community for a pause in the fighting to allow humanitarian aid to enter the city. UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon says nearly 500 people have been killed and 2,000 injured in Aleppo over the past month. Food rations are also expected to run out by the end of the month. While welcoming the pause, Ban said the measure is far from enough. He pushed for a rare emergency General Assembly session on Syria to end the almost 6-year war, which he warned could destroy Aleppo by the end of the year.
I regret that the Security Council has failed to discharge its responsibilities to uphold the peace and security for Syria. I call on all of you to cooperate and fulfill your collective responsibility to protect.
EU leaders are also poised to take stronger action on the conflict, considering further sanctions on Russia for its air assistance to the Assad regime, involving possible war crimes. Arriving at a summit in Brussels, French President François Hollande and German Chancellor Angela Merkel called on Moscow to stop bombing the rebels.
We have put the pressure on Vladimir Putin so that he carries out his duty. That means bringing about the truce, stopping the bombing, rather than continuing to act in support of the Syrian regime. So, all the options are open as long as no truce is respected, and while there is this will to bring a town, Aleppo, to the ground, a martyr town.
The President of the European Council said a decision wouldn't be reached on Thursday, but the EU will keep all options open, including sanctions, should the crimes continue. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Now, staying with the EU, a 2-day summit of European leaders has kicked off in Brussels. They're attending her first EU summit since the UK voted to leave the pact. Prime Minister Theresa May sought to reassure her fellow EU leaders on the issue of Brexit, saying the UK is in fact definitely going to leave the Union. She added that the UK will play a full role in the EU until its departure and will continue to be a strong and dependable partner even after leaving the EU. French President François Hollande had previously warned Prime Minister May that negotiations would be hard if she pushed a so-called hard Brexit. German Chancellor Angela Merkel expressed a more neutral stance, saying the 27-member union is waiting for Britain's notification and the issue can wait until the end of March, when Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty is triggered by London. The British Prime Minister had promised to trigger that article of that treaty by then, beginning 2 years of formal exit negotiations with the European Union. Now, as the race for the White House enters the home stretch now, Donald Trump has clarified his position on his claims the election is rigged. Following up on remarks made during the final televised debate, the Republican candidate says he will accept the election outcome if he wins. Park Jong-hong reports.
Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump has underscored his refusal to accept the election outcome if he suspects something fishy. Trump added he will accept the November 8th election outcome if he wins. His remarks come amid concerns from both Democrats and Republicans about bucking the American tradition of a peaceful power transfer. Speaking at a rally in Delaware, Ohio, Trump insisted that he will not surrender the right to contest the outcome.
That I will totally accept the results of this great and historic presidential election if I win. I would also reserve my right to contest or file a legal challenge in the case of a questionable result.
Trump has repeatedly claimed the election will be rigged against him. In response to Trump's claims, President Obama said the suggestion is dangerous, adding that Trump was, quote, doing the work of our adversaries. Former President Jimmy Carter, although not singling out Trump by name, said that claims the U.S. election will be rigged are baseless and undermine American democracy. Republican Senator John McCain of Arizona called on the presidential candidates to respect the results of next month's election. While there have been irregularities in U.S. presidential elections, he said they were never to the extent of affecting the eventual outcome. Park Jong-hong, Arirang News.
Now, the United States says it's, quote, baffled by Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte's recent announcement that the country will cut economic and military ties with America. Duterte made his controversial remarks on Thursday during his state visit to China. He said China-Philippine relations have entered a new springtime, although the two had long maintained a difficult dialogue regarding control of the South China Sea. He also said the US had finally lost its struggle for diplomatic influence in Asia. Now, despite the remarks, the US State Department said the United States will remain rock solid in honoring the mutual defense treaty signed by the two countries. It added that the US Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs, Daniel Russell, will travel to Manila this weekend to talk with Filipino government officials and get a better understanding of the situation. Okay, well, that's all we have for now on this Friday afternoon here in Seoul. Have a great day, and if we don't see you, a wonderful weekend. Goodbye.